Just witnessing for a moment. Witnessing your own internal experience. And when you feel like it's time to move on to the next shape, I invite you to meet me in a child's pose. And if you're not ready to move on, you can stay here as long as you like. I'm going to move my props out of the way. Okay. When you come into your child's pose, you might choose to take a wide stance. So that might look like taking your knees as wide as your mat. Maybe your toes touch back behind you. And then you could start to send your hips back toward the heels. Maybe allowing your forehead to come down onto the mat. Or if you prefer to leave your gaze lifted, you could always stack your fists underneath your chin. And if this feels uncomfortable for any reason at all, maybe it feels like you're a bit exposed, you might take a blanket and wrap it around the back. Maybe even wrapping it around your legs. And then returning into any form of child's pose that does feel welcome. You always have the choice to forego a wide stance. And so if it feels more welcome to have your knees closer together and the blanket wrapped behind you, that is another choice. How you come into the shape or how your body looks in the shape really is of no consequence here. It really doesn't matter. What matters is being present here with yourself in your body. I am home in my body. We'll be here for another 3 breaths. Last breath here, in and out at your own pace. You might choose to stay here longer, or if you are ready to move on to the next shape, you might begin to lift your head to look at your hands. And you have 2 options here, 3 really. You might choose to stay in a child's pose and just place your elbows and your forearms on the floor as we move into some spinal movement in a cat-cow. And so here's a modified or variation of the same shape. And you can just stay here with the blanket wrapped around you if you'd like, or if you just prefer to be in this shape of child's pose, then you might begin to inhale and draw your chest forward. Maybe your gaze even looks forward. And then as you exhale, perhaps you begin to curl inward, allowing the spine to reach back and up. And then allowing your inhale to rock you forward again. So this is one option. Another option is to make your way forward onto all 4s. And you might choose to leave the blanket here, or you might choose to remove it. I'm going to go ahead and remove it just so that you can see what I'm doing. So if you'd prefer to come onto all fours, you might begin to place your palms on the floor. Maybe they end up somewhere underneath your shoulders. And then you might begin to inhale and allow the spine to drop down toward the floor. Kind of like creating a bow. Then as you exhale, you could begin to round the spine up. Maybe even allowing the chin and the tailbone to draw in toward one another. So wherever you're at, I invite you to take another 3 or 4 breaths here. Moving at your own pace, in your own way. Oh, right, I did say that there were 3 options. And the third option is to move in any way that feels supportive to you. So if taking this cat-cow does not feel welcomed, you might choose to simply move in any organic way. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to look like anything you've seen before. You can simply move naturally. You might even do a little bit of both. You might explore cat-cow and add in organic movement as you see fit. We'll start to take our last breath here. Returning back to center. If you are in child's pose, you could begin to move into a tabletop. We're only going to be here for a second as we either move into a downward facing dog, or if you know that you do not prefer a down dog, I'll give you another option. So from your tabletop, you might begin to find some engagement in your core. So maybe on an exhale, you can start to press the air out and find some gentle core engagement. It doesn't have to be 100% strength. That's not really the goal. It's just to provide a little bit of support for your lower back. And then you might choose to walk your hands out forward, a little bit of ways in front of you. And then taking a breath in and exhale, you might begin to bring the chest and the forehead down toward the floor. It doesn't have to touch the floor, but if you'd like to rest your forehead on the mat, that is also an option. So this is our puppy shape. Another option is if you'd like a full down dog, you could tuck your toes and maybe you keep the knees bent to start. I always like doing that first. It creates a little bit of space. You could start to send the hips back. And then from this knee bent position shape, you could allow one heel to work its way down toward the floor, allow it to come back up, and then switch it out for the opposite heel. So you could walk out your feet, so to speak. Wherever you're at, I invite you to be here for the next 3 to 4 breaths. However, you can leave at any time or you can change your mind at any time. Last breath. If you are in the puppy shape, you might begin to lift your head and shift your hips forward and walk your hands back, coming back into a tabletop shape. And then we can all take our gaze up toward our hands. If you're in down dog, you might begin to bend your knees. And then however it feels natural to you, you could step your feet forward. And I'll meet you in a forward fold. You might choose to have your feet as wide as your hips. maybe as wide as your mat, especially if your hamstrings are feeling really tight. It might be helpful to have your feet a little bit wider. However, you don't have to. With your next inhale, option to bring your hands to your shins or maybe some blocks as we lengthen through the spine and find a halfway lift. With your next exhale, you could begin to find your way back down into a forward fold. Perhaps even giving your head a shake no, and then a nod yes. Allowing the head to grow heavy and just hang out. If you're ready to make your way out of this forward fold, you could begin to inhale, bend your knees and rise up. You might even reach your hands above your head. And exhale, hands can come down to heart center. Option to leave the hands here, or you might release them to your sides. You choose.